No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this holiday hack. These are the top leadership videos as being watched by current and aspiring leaders of Generation Z. This is holiday hack number 11 in our 13-part series. And the video we're going to be discussing today is by Linda Hill. It's called How to Manage for Collective Creativity. And I like this a lot. There's some rigor that went behind the information because she did a lot of research and a lot of studying of people to kind of put this theory together on what it takes to lead people. And so I really like this a lot because she starts out talking about how a lot of people think about innovation as these light bulb moments, like, oh, someone invented something. And what really happened is that it takes a lot of work and effort and creativity from large groups of people, not just one person kind of, thinking up something one day. Those things can happen, but the vast majority of innovation in organizations comes from groups of people and working together. And that process, not just a person who wakes up one morning with an epiphany and saves the world.
Yeah, no, I love that a lot because I think that you're right. Like, I think a lot of times people think that like somebody just has the best idea and like we run with that. And then those of us that have led people for a long time realize that somebody might have a really good idea, but it's going to require a good amount of dialogue, refinement, adjustment, things like that to make it something that can withstand over time and also be something that would, by definition, innovative that other people could use and that you could scale without having to have the original people. And the biggest part of the video that I love that she talks about is she says that the innovation rarely happens unless you have both diversity and conflict.
Yes, of
course.
And
I love that, right?
Yes.
Because, having people that see it differently, have different ideas, have different ways of thinking, and different ways of working, and then having a space where they're like that's allowed to happen and encouraged to happen. From a conflict standpoint, or like what we would say is like healthy debate, like I think that's so important, especially coming off of the last thing we talked about a couple of shows ago around psychological safety, and just like having people that have differing opinions, but creating this space where like that not only is that okay, but it's encouraged for us to have that so that we can find the best idea possible.
Right. Well, you have to have psychological safety because if you have diversity and you have conflict without psychological safety, that's just fighting. Right. And that doesn't work very well. That's just people digging their heels in and becoming very passionate about their own point of view without regard to what somebody else's point of view might be. And the word she uses for it is called creative abrasion. And I like this because, being abrasive can seem like a negative thing, but how she describes it is it's the process of creating a portfolio of alternatives. And I like this because I think about it from a standpoint of like hiring people. So let's say that I have 100 applicants for a job and I whittle it down to, the top, 4 or 5 candidates, and I only have one spot open. Well, one person's going to get the job. But that doesn't mean that the other 3 or 4 people that made it that far go into the pile with the other 96 people. It means that they are a portfolio of alternatives. It means that while we don't expect them to just sit around waiting for the phone call, they have a life to move on to. You have these people that have gone through this entire thing. They clearly are right for the job. It was just that somebody else was more right for the moment. And those people are now, they become part of the Rolodex, so to speak. You would call them up if you have another open position and to see if that your organization or your team was something they still wanted to be a part of. And maybe that's a no. Maybe that alternative idea is no longer relevant or valid a year or 2 years down the road. But this idea of creating a portfolio of ideas where one will end up being the one you move forward with, but the others aren't bad. They're just less right for the moment or for that particular problem that you're looking to solve. That alternative thing is, and framing it that way is a really great way to say to people that just because your thing wasn't picked right now, it doesn't mean it wasn't good. It doesn't mean that theirs was better. It just means that for the moment, someone else's was the right thing to do, and this is one we're going to re-explore later on. It stays in that portfolio.
Yeah, I really like the part as well where when you're thinking about like how do you create healthy conflict in a way that is going to drive innovation forward. And she shares another example of like breaking off, having it to solve for a situation, breaking it off into two teams and being like, all right, you're going to work on this team, you're going to work on that team, and then you're going to go full time into like figuring out the solve for what would work with kind of these two different views of how to get to the solution.
Yes.
And then having them come back together and then trade the work to say, now you look at this and see like, what do you see in it? What can be done? How would you make what they created work? And then how would the other team do the same thing? How would they make what the other team created work? And then finding through that dialogue and conversation and this kind of quote unquote conflict, the best possible solutions to then move it forward collectively together. And I think that a lot of times when you're on leadership teams and leading people, that conflict manifests itself as individual conflict. And it's like some person has an idea, this other person has an idea, and therefore there's conflict between two people instead of the conflict of the idea. And I think as a leader, you have to be conscious of that, keep an eye on that, and adjust for that.
Right. I want to talk about that. I think it's an important, healthy part of this, but it's the leader's role to make sure this is happening the right way. So I want to give it to one of our sponsors, and then we'll talk about that. All right. So Linda says that it's the leader's role to come up with what she describes as creative resolution, which is combining ideas and what she says, even opposing ideas to create new and useful solutions. So it's not an either or, but a both. And if you're a leader, that is ultimately part of your job. If you're leading a team of people, is how do you figure out how to make it so you're not choosing somebody over somebody else, but you're implementing the ideas for the value of the idea in its whole, not the face value based on who submitted it or what one was better in the moment. But how do you make it so the ideas that are submitted are ones that can all be incorporated, even if somehow it looks like they might oppose each other?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I like just kind of like the idea of, as a leader in that type of role, of being someone who is comfortable hiring and adding people to the team that will push back and argue with you as a leader. Like, and again, I know those are big terms like argue and push back, but really you're looking for people that have a diverse and different type of look at the work and are comfortable bringing that to the table, because as a leader, being that kind of human glue of the team and being the person who is helping to push it forward and kind of like architecting the outcomes and not directing the ways to get to the outcomes, I think is really where the magic is at. And that's where you really build out these, phenomenal teams and cultures where people can be very, very creative and be comfortable with, again, knowing that they're adding value to an idea and that sometimes it will be their idea. I think is really the most important thing there.
Right. When I was watching this video, I was looking at it through the lens of something that that is already kind of fully formed, and then kind of picking it apart and looking backwards at it. And so think about like the first person who came up with a sport as a whole. Like someone said, I have this idea where you hit a ball into a hole. So they invented golf, right? It wasn't just great. Let's play our first match. It was okay, but what do you do if this happens? What do you do if that happens? What do you do if like all these different things have to go into play that then have to be solved for? And the person who started this doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but that doesn't mean that the idea isn't good. It just means that it takes a group of people to kind of think through all the implications of what that might mean. And you may come across something that kills the idea as a whole. I mean, think about all the things that started out seeming like a good idea, and then it just never took off for one reason or another. And then there are other ones that kind of have stood the test of time, but they don't look the same today as they did when they were first invented. Things change because people change and environments change. And sometimes look at some of the rules that have been put in place in sports over the years, where the sport's been around for decades or generations, but then there's a new rule that gets implemented, and whenever there's a new rule, people go, "Oh, that's ridiculous. This is not the right thing to do." There's a reason why that rule wasn't in place at the beginning and why it is now. There's a problem that is trying to be solved for, and maybe it was a problem that was there all along, but the right people were not in the room to see it for what it actually was and to come up with a solution. And so we just live with it. And this happens in business, it happens in sports, it happens everywhere. And it's why you need to be constantly looking through these lenses of how do you get people in a room together that have the diversity of background and thought to look at this through a lot of different lenses, think about the problems that are actually happening, and solve for them in a way that moves it forward. Not that radically changes everything, but that moves it forward in a way that allows you to keep in spirit of what it was, but also solve for a problem that might be happening that then allows the thing as a whole to live longer. That's how organizations live longer. That's how you have organizations that have been around for 100 years or more. They don't do the same thing now than they did 100 years ago, right? They do something vastly different. They might even be completely different organizations. But over time, they had to change because they had the right people in the room to say, what do we need to do if the overarching goal is to just keep this thing moving forward?
Yeah, and if you want to know how golf was invented, just search Robin Williams' invention of golf. It's the best description of how that sport was created. It made me think of that when you said that. Yes, I think as well, like, there's something to be said around creativity in the workplace and the impact that it has on people's feeling of kind of like optimism and connection. And I think that's something as well that when you're not just thinking about like what's needed to innovate and how are you making sure that you have the right people around to kind of have debate and have some good healthy conflict and have a leader who is kind of not only helping that, but supports that, but expects that from people. There is something to be said about the ability to flex creative juices at work and how that really helps people to build connection. I see it all the time. When you're able to tap into that piece around somebody's passion or creativeness and give them some space and time to bring that forward and to utilize that, it really just kind of ignites the spark in their eye, and they really get a chance to bring all of themselves to work.
Right. And as a leader, again, a lot of this work is done individually with the people who will then eventually be in the same room together, because each of those people have to know that you as a leader are leading with your values, and that whatever decision the group comes to or that you have to kind of sign off on, that it's not based on a favoritism or that you like somebody better than somebody else, and whether or not that impression is given in the correct way will be based not on how you act in that room, but how you've interacted with each person in the room individually in the days and weeks and months leading up to whatever this decision is. And if each person believes that what you say to them privately is how you are leading publicly, then when their idea isn't the one that gets taken, or when it gets kind of put into the portfolio of alternatives as opposed to used right away, they're not going to take it as a personal slight or that you didn't choose a better idea, you chose the person you like more. They'll take it as the truth, which is that a different idea might be the right one for now, but their idea is still good, and we're going to continue to explore it as time goes on.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.